Good morning and welcome to the 2026 Economic Forecast, sponsored by the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber. We're so excited to have you all here this morning. We appreciate your support and your attendance. As I said, continue to enjoy your breakfast, but we've got a jam-packed program this morning and we want to get started. And on that note, I've been doing this for a few years now. For the record, I want to say, due to the outstanding job done by the staff at the Village Club, I'm told they served the entire full room breakfast in 9 minutes, so thank you so much. For the first time ever, it actually allows us to begin the program 5 minutes early, so I'm stunned, actually. So thank you all for your attention. As I said, my name's Joe Bauman. I'm the President and CEO of the Chamber. On behalf of our staff and our Board of Directors and our ambassadors, I want to welcome you this morning to the first major event of 2026 for us. So before we get started, I have some introductions. First, I'd like to introduce the rest of our staff. For those of you who haven't been in touch with us since the end of last year, our staff looks a little different now, and it looks a little smaller. So many of you will remember Layla Broughton, who was our Membership Engagement Manager. Layla went on to bigger and better things at the end of the year, so we said goodbye to her. And Megan Davidson, who had been our videographer and social media person, also took another opportunity, and so we wish them both well, and they're doing great things. But we still have me. We still have Kelly Bennett, our operations manager. Say hi, Kelly. We have Annie Burns, our event and marketing manager. Annie, somewhere maybe, I don't know. Oh, she's over there. And then we're very fortunate to have an intern for the semester, which really helps out a lot, especially with our smaller staff, Maria Magnoli from Oakland University. So welcome. So our chamber's pretty busy. We have 40-some events every year. We have closing in on 700 member businesses that we count as members of the chamber. We couldn't do everything that we do, especially now, without the support of two of our volunteer groups, the first being our board of directors that set overall policy for the chamber. They approve the budget. They keep me flying straight, hopefully, most of the time. And then our ambassadors, who are your business peers who volunteer their time and their talent to support our events, to work our events. They do our new member visits. They do our care calls. I mean, they're really our foot soldiers. So I want to, especially acknowledge them this morning. So if you are on the board of directors or an ambassador, if you could please stand to be recognized. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank our sponsors for this morning's program. Our sponsors play a critical role for the chamber. They support individual events like this. Through their support, you were able to try to keep ticket prices for our events manageable in the days of ever-escalating costs and expenses. So we really rely on them to help us do that. And then more importantly is we do a lot of programming that's either low cost or no cost to our membership. And for our smaller member businesses, that means a lot to them. The support of our sponsors allows us to have the ability to offer those programs and events at no charge or little charge. And we couldn't, again, do it without the support of our corporate sponsors. Our sponsors for this morning's breakfast, our diamond sponsor is Clark Hill. Our platinum sponsor is Bank of Ann Arbor. Our gold sponsors are Fenner, Melsterman, Dooling, Oswald Companies, and Citizen State Bank. Our coffee bar sponsor is McDonald Hopkins, and our valet sponsor is 220 Restaurant and the Elia Group. And when you're on your way out, there's a bunch of bags sitting over there, courtesy of the Elia Group as the valet sponsor, and you'll want to take them because they contain booze. So again, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to introduce our moderator for this morning's program. Our moderator is Gavin Amazaga. Did I get that right? Got it right. Okay. Gavin focuses his practice on complex commercial litigation and contract disputes with Clark Hill. He assists his clients in all phases of litigation and alternative dispute resolution. His practice involves drafting pleadings, preparing discovery requests and responses, motions, and other critical legal documents aimed at securing favorable outcomes for its clients. Prior to joining Clark Hill, Gavin gained hands-on experience as a summer associate in the firm's litigation group following his graduation from the University of Michigan Law School. At this time, Gavin, come on up and kick off our economic breakfast.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Paul Traub. He's currently an economic consultant for America's Commercial Transportation Research Company, ACT Research. Previously, he was chief economist for ACT Research. He was senior business economist at the Detroit branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and was an economist with Chrysler LLC, ending his tenure there as chief economist. Traub was an adjunct faculty at Oakland University in the School of Business, and he has served on the advisory boards for Oakland University, Baker College, and Lawrence Technological University. At the Fed, Traub co-created the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago's Detroit Economic Activity Index and was a frequent contributor to Midwest Economy and Michigan Economy blogs. He holds a BBA from the University of Michigan Dearborn and an MBA from Oakland University. So, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Thank you, Gavin. Yes, I won't try your last name. Well, I want to thank the Chamber for allowing me to speak again this year. I think it's getting up there in the number of years I've been here. And I see some familiar faces in the audience, and it's always good to see people wanting to come back, so that's good, and some new faces, which is important. I'm going to talk pretty quickly because I have, what's the clock start yet? I got 20 minutes, and I've got 120 slides. So that'll make me move quickly. Basically, I want to talk about the economies. We talk quickly about, I always call it C plus I plus G, the consumption, investment, government spending. We'll talk about consumer attitudes falling. This is called the K-shaped economy, if anybody's heard that term, where equities and stock markets are rising, but people's attitudes are going in the dump. That's kind of the shape of the K. We'll talk a bit about that. Inflation, which remains above the 2% target and probably will continue there for a while. I want to spend a lot of time and save most of my 20 minutes about the income and wealth gap and putting more pressure on low-income houses. I think a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today, when we talk about inability to afford a house, inability to do things, is really being exacerbated more by what's going on with the wealth gap. And so we'll get into that in some detail. Business will touch on some business conditions are facing headwinds. They continue to. Job growth remains weak. We didn't get the January number yet. It was supposed to be out last Friday, but it was delayed till today. It should be out any minute. And economic growth is projected to remain either at or above the long-term trend for some reasons that aren't always favorable to the reason it's there. Key risks are, of course, tariffs. What's going to happen with uncertainty around that. There's a new nominee for the head of the chair. We'll see if he can actually change policy direction and how quickly he's going to be able to do that given what the president's been asking for. AI and its impact is going to be on jobs, and where is it going to take us in the future is a real uncertainty. Midterm elections, which could end up stalling the agenda. We could end up in 2 years of lame duck. Will there be more geopolitical pressure? And this last one on here I threw out there, Trump threatens to block the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge. I'm not saying that it's going to have any major impact on Michigan or even comes out. That bullet point there is to really point to continued chaos going forward as we deal with what's coming out of Washington on a regular basis. So there's your GDP number, so take a good look at it. That's not about all you're going to see of it. 4.4%, that's a real strong growth month. And you can look at how it's divided up and where it's been in the last 10 years. It's mostly consumption. And this is why I think this discussion about income and wealth discrepancy is so important, because almost 70% of the economy is what we consume as individuals, not what we build. You can see that gross domestic investment is about 18%, governments about 16%. It had been declining readily as they keep making cuts to the government, Doge and stuff. And it's actually down a little bit from its 10-year average. And you can see net exports is always a negative. So you add imports and exports, exports are subtracted, in imports are subtracted, and you have a negative contribution. So when you look at how that 4.4 was made up, you can see 2.3% of it was consumption. And so consumers are consuming. And then the net export side added another 1.6 because you can see there was both additions from more exports, but also additions from fewer imports. Fewer imports, fewer supply, more same demand, what ends up happening to prices. So that is an area which, while the president is very focused on, is an area that's going to continue to add inflationary pressure to the economy. And when you break up the consumption, it's services. People going out to dinner, going to shows, traveling, those kinds of things. And non-durable goods, of course, that's your food and things that you eat and wear. But the durable goods side is not doing as well in the contribution. So here's your 4.4, there's your path for the last few months of quarter-over-quarter SAR. And there's the year-over-year. I like to look at the year-over-year because what's the trend doing? So it was falling off as we started 2025, and it has picked up a little bit on a year-over-year basis under this administration. But you could look at the consumption side, the far chart on the right, and you can see that's been falling and slowly falling off as personal consumption is starting to wane a little bit. And being 2/3 of the economy, or 70%, that's going to be a headwind going forward. The consumer, I always talk about ability and willingness. You have an ability to buy and you have a willingness to buy. I may have money in my pocket, but am I willing to separate myself, that money from my pocket? So we look at ability, and it really boils down to real disposable income growth. And that has been lagging and falling and falling. It just grew at 1%. In November, we'll get more data out shortly. A lot of data has been delayed because of cuts to departments. And the partial shutdown of the government, but really a lot of what Doge did is really hit back some of the departments that Census Bureau areas that have made major cuts to, and it's been slowing data down. Personal interest payments are starting to rise. Of course, higher interest rates will raise your interest payments. CPI, as Consumer Price Index, is 2.7, way above the 2%. We use at the Fed, we used to use PCE, but CPI is what people think of because it's what you deal with on a daily basis and hear most about. Yield curve is starting to get a little wider, which is good. You know, you borrow short, lend long. If you're a banker, you understand. It's good to have some, even though interest rates are higher, but it's good to have some space in there. Consumer attitudes keep falling. So everything's great, 4.4 growth in the economy, attitudes continue to fall. Claims, nobody wants to leave their job, right? Hiring slow, but so if you got a job, keep it, so people aren't leaving. When we look at hours worked, and the stock market continues to rise, so there's your consumer. So we look at credit, you can see that the credit level, the amount of consumer credit as compared to DPI is coming down, and which is a good thing, as higher interest rates bring down the use of credit. That's kind of what they're trying to do. But look the way it was back in the day, a nice pattern. And all of a sudden, when interest rates fell, everybody started borrowing more money. And it's become more of an expectancy. And people spend credit cards. It's, I don't know if you ever watched the show Schitt's Creek when it was on, and David would go out and spend. But Dad, I put it on the credit card, you know. But who's going to pay the credit card? I don't know. It's just a credit card, right? It's just spending. But you look at interest payments now as interest rates rise, and it's starting to rise at a larger and larger percent. The yield curve, there's your split. These are just numbers. Mortgage rates are starting to come down. I have to throw some numbers out there for you. But, so while the yield curve is doing better, you're not going to see a real drop in interest rates anytime soon, in my personal opinion. Even if you lower the short end by lowering the federal funds rate, you still got to deal with the long end. And there's a lot of money out there. Long end rates, risk, probably will stay high. Mortgage rates are falling, but they're not falling the way a lot of people would like them to. But however, if you bought a house, anybody here old enough to have bought a house in the 1980s, your mortgage was probably 12, 14, 18%. You could put it on a credit card and you'd be better off than take the frequent flyer miles and fly around the world. So they're coming down, but no time soon it'll fall. So you can see the CPI numbers, you can see the 2 sevens. Food is 3.1%, grew on a month-over-month basis by 7.5% on an annualized basis. So when you look at the essentials, food, shelter, medical, all rising. And that's what I was trying to talk about, is who's getting hurt most are the people that are the low income level that try to do that. And you look at services, which is what we spend most of our money on, continuing to rise at a fairly large clip. So we spend a lot of money on food. You look at the 10-year, you look at the period 2007 to 2019, food spending went up. And this is, expenditures on food went up about 2.7%. Expenditures on food in the last went up 7.1% on an average per month. Food expenditures, prices on food, everything continues to rise. Personal consumption as a piece of it has remained relatively flat, even though so much more being spent on food. And beef. So everybody wants to know why beef prices. I went to buy a hamburger, it was $10 for a pound of hamburger. And it's like, what. But the biggest problem is we're not producing the beef because the cattle herd is so small. So you're seeing, look at back in the day when I was young and how much beef was being produced based on the size of the population. Producing a tremendous amount of beef. It was the go-to protein, right? Everybody ate beef. I never ate fish, chicken. We ate eggs, but never ate chicken. And you look at the beef prices are going up, and that's because of the shrinking herd. And a lot of it had to do with the drought, higher operating costs. There was a lot of the tariffs hurt the business model. People are getting out of the business, getting away from being ranchers. So while current prices are high, I don't see this changing unless we start producing more, and it's hard to grow a cow. You can put a chicken, remember when eggs were so high because we had the chicken flu, but they fell pretty quickly because you can grow a chicken in a few days. It takes a number of years from a calf to be producing good amounts of meat. So as that herd's going to be down, it's going to be down a while. So at least 4 or 5 years before you can even see a change to that. And then, of course, another big headwind that's going to be on prices are the tariffs and the falling dollar. President Trump wants a weaker dollar. He thinks a weaker dollar promotes more purchasing of things, domestic items, less from abroad. I think that logic is flawed, and I'll show you why in a minute. But when you add the tariff rate, 10%, I don't care what you say, the exporting countries are not paying those tariffs. A report just came out that in 2025, the average household's probably spent about $1,000 more. It doesn't seem like a lot to us. This year, it's probably going to be about $1,300 more. It doesn't seem like a lot to us, but it's a lot to people that are living paycheck to paycheck. So here's the kind of the K idea that I talked about. You can see market's going great. So when things are going great in the market and your 401k is doing good, I used to always say this, used to always do the dance, the 401k dance, the market's up, market's up. But attitudes continue to fall. You put those two charts together, and what do you get? A K. You get an arm going up and an arm going down, and that's your K economy. But when you look at income and how it's distributed, who's getting it? You can see that income at the top levels of the top 20%, that's actually the top 5%. Look at the almost hockey stick shape that's been created in the last decade. That's the tax cuts, right? All of a sudden, their money is going up. They're getting more and more money. And then you look at the growth rate, over the long-term growth rate from 1950 to 2024. So if my income is growing by 1.36%, okay, over that long period of time, it takes about 40 years and it'll double. But it's going to 2% for the top. How are you ever going to catch up, right? You're never going to catch up. If that was reversed, you might be able to catch up over time. But not only are the richer people getting richer, they're getting richer faster. And the people that are just making ends meet are getting richer, but it takes them twice as long to get the same kind of return on their money. When you look at the spending then, and you break it down, in the top quartile, they do 60% of all spending, right? So who's down here in the bottom, the first 20%, they do less than 10% of all the spending. 20% of the population doing less than 10% of all the consumption. So you can look at higher earners are driving up the share of spending, and nearly half of all personal consumption expenditures come from the top 10%. And higher income spending grew much faster, in the top 10% growing by 2.7% than the second half of the economy, right? While lower income spenders increased just 0.7%. So spending is entering a period of what I'd like to call stadium pricing. This is my new term, stadium pricing. You ever go to a stadium, buy a hot dog, buy a beer, right? You're a captive audience. They can charge you whatever they want, and it's what you're willing to pay, right? And that's where we're kind of this is scaring me, because I have a son and I have grandchildren, and they can only pay what you can afford to buy. So while prices have always been set by ability to pay, that's not new. What I've showed you before about the income disparity, it changes that dynamic. And things like automobiles and housing and medical care are going up faster because it's ability to pay, right? And if I can pay more than you, did anybody try to get a ticket for the Olympics, right? And, you know, buy a concert ticket, price on it's $100, $1,000, right? It's your ability to pay. So this phenomenon is putting increased pressure on lower income consumers to compete for even the essentials that they need to live on day by day. So we look at wealth growth. Look at the top 0.1%. That's 133,000 households, right? They have net worth of $24.9 trillion. Average per household, $187 million. Look at the bottom, 50%. 50%, that's 66 million households have total net wealth of $4.3 trillion. 66 million households compared to 133,000. Average 64,000 per household in net wealth. How are you going to retire on $64,000? Most of that would maybe even be their house. So when you look at the top 10 richest people in the country, 400 richest people have 6.6 trillion. There's 400 people, 6.6 trillion. Top 10 have 2.1 trillion. And a decade ago, it took $1 billion to make the Forbes list, with a net worth of $3.8 billion was within the top 50%. Currently, the bottom are worth an average of $4 billion. And there were 14 new ads last year with $10 billion or more in wealth. So what is $1 trillion? And I love to tell this. You standing in the corner already? $1 trillion is, if I had $1 trillion and I spent $1 million a day, it would take me till the year, starting in year 1 on the Mayan calendar, it would take me to the year 2737 to spend it all. So right now, if I started spending at year 1, day 1, I'd still have $260 billion left to spend at $1 million a day. Who needs $1 trillion? Right? Assets. Who's got all the assets? Look at the top 0.1%. Who's got all the debt? Look at the bottom 50%. Look at liabilities to income. Housing market crash got up to 183% on the bottom 50%. Right now it's at 44%. Income growth continues to grow at the top, average, but when you look at the median income growth, it's separating faster and faster and faster. We look at household spending, and I just took the essentials. I took food, clothing, gasoline, took travel, housing units, health care. Spent $72,000 would be the average if you spent the average. How much of your income would it take after tax? At median income, at $80-some thousand, it would take 86%. You adjust it for taxes, it takes 97% of you. So that's before anything else. At median income, you spend 90% just to get the essentials. You have $1,700 left to spend on all your niceties for the rest of the year. How do you save any money? Business is doing better. some good indicators. I got to go fast now because she's not standing here. Okay, I was told I'm gonna get told they got a hook. They got to hook me off because I just love it. I don't get out much anymore, so when I get out, damn right I'm gonna do stuff. Okay, so this is corporate profits. Here's the tax cut. I got to show this. Right? It's a hockey stick. And I don't want to say I want to raise your taxes, but everyone in this room, most everyone in this room we're in that top 10%. I think we have to feel a little more empathy towards people that are in the bottom 50%. So every other person, not necessarily in Birmingham or Bloomfield, but if you go out into the country, every other person there is probably in that bottom 50% that you see, right? And they're struggling. So why do we say that people are upset? Why are things bad? But you look at the Dow Jones, and I kind of created a cyclically adjusted price to earnings ratio. Do you remember the dot-com bubble? And look where we are today. Is it overpriced? Everybody say, oh, no, it's not overpriced. But the market is booming because there's so much more money to chase it, right? Supply and demand. If I got $1 trillion to invest, you're buying big chunks of the market. Read the book 1929. My wife bought it for me. Thank you, Margaret. It is a lot in there about how this started led into the Great Depression, right? Buying on margins, spending large amounts of money, and blowing up the market. So we look at corporate bonds, the risk, and so it's not much risk no matter what business you're in, although you have higher interest rates. This is the ISM Purchasing Manager Index, took the largest jump in 1 month. It's only jumped that much 3 other times, dating back to the starting of the survey. I think there's something wrong, but that's my personal opinion. I'll show you later. But you look at net new orders, new peak on nominal terms, adjusted for inflation. It still continues to be quite low. And this is why I'm saying why I think it's horrible. Here you go, a 4-point jump, largest we've seen outside of coming back from the pandemic since 2002. And then you read the words. Hope is a word that no longer exists, basically. Although the volumes are good, things are going bad. Every comment in the survey was negative, yet the thing jumped larger than it's ever jumped before. I mean, as an economist, I'm going, okay, what are these guys? I want what they're having, right? Because they're really happy, and I don't know why. Producer prices, and this is why inflation's not going to go away, because producer prices continue to rise, especially in manufacturing. Getting hit very hard, and our next speaker will probably talk to that. Look at the ratio between imports and exports, right? They follow each other. I divide the import price deflator by the export price deflator, and look what's happened. And tariffs, right? Everything coming from overseas is tremendously more, and a lot of stuff from overseas goes into manufacturing. A lot of that stuff makes the machinery that needs to run the plants when she's standing. And so here's the employment data. We added about 50,000, average per month, 49,000 last month. And since the announcement of Independence Day, we've lost manufacturing jobs every month. Employment's very closely tied to what we put out. This is when the pandemic started. Here's when the pandemic ended. Here we are right now, right? We're right in the middle. If we keep losing jobs, you're going to keep falling down that. It's pretty linear in my mind. The next month is going to be strong, according to the Atlanta Fed. But look where it's coming from. Intellectual property and equipment, AI, investment in computers and farms. So my forecast is still rosy, but for all the wrong reasons, right? We're going to have less imports, which means higher prices. Consumers continue to buy because they've got a lot of money, and we're going to have consumption strong. So we'd have 2.3, 2.4, 2.1 over the next 3 years, or the end of this year, next 2 years. And fourth quarter over fourth quarter is pretty strong.
You did. Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. that was honestly, that was incredible. So thank you. So our next speaker, Ingrid Tai. She is the president of the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. Ingrid serves as the official representative of the MEP National Network in Michigan. Previously, she served as director of economic development for Oakland County. Ingrid was the executive director of Birmingham, Michigan Shopping District. She also worked for the state of Michigan in economic development, promoting business investment and job growth in Michigan, working with the private sector, local economic developers, and government organizations, and also in workforce development, implementing programs, policy, and statewide initiatives to improve veteran employment. Ingrid attended Vanderbilt University on a 4-year ROTC scholarship and was commissioned as an Army Signal Corps officer upon graduation. She obtained her Master of Public Administration from the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. Welcome. Thank you, Ingrid.
Morning. It's so good to be back in Birmingham. A lot of familiar faces, a lot of good friends in the room, so thank you all for coming this morning. So, as we mentioned, I am now running an organization. It's called the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, and we work with manufacturers across the state. We primarily focus on the small and the medium-sized manufacturers, and we provide training and consulting, very technical training, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But what I want to do is segue a little and go, we were at 30,000 feet, and we are now, I'd like to take you to like 10 and 5,000 feet. What are we seeing on the ground? So first, before we get into this, has anyone ever heard of my organization, MMTC? Has anyone ever, do we have a couple folks in here? I'll give you the high-level 30-second overview. I see Joe raising his hand. Thank you, Joe. We are actually part of a national network. We are a program that is through the Department of Commerce. And we started about 36 years ago with the premise and the mission to help small and medium-sized manufacturing across the United States so that we could bolster manufacturing and we could compete also internationally, right? We're seeing a lot of pressure from other countries like China. And so every state has something like us. We all look slightly different, but this is just a nice little chart to show that. We are a statewide entity. We are headquartered over in Plymouth, so not too far from here. And then we have offices and locations in Traverse City, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, and I have a few folks who cover the UP. They do a lot of windshield time up there. One of the things that I like to mention to people is we are a nonprofit model. We do get some funding through the federal government and some through the state. And the reason is that it makes us more affordable to the small and medium-sized manufacturer, and it helps augment our funding so that we can go and take a small engagement half a day with a tool and die shop somewhere in rural or northern Michigan, or a place that maybe a larger consulting firm might not necessarily take on. I like to brag that we are transparent and accountable. There is an independent agency that comes in about a year after we work with folks, and they actually ask them, how did MMTC do? Did you increase your sales? Did you retain or add people to your payrolls, et cetera? And we report that out to make sure that we can still get our funding. We have a very wide spectrum of services that we provide, so it's everything from operational efficiency, lean manufacturing, Kaizens. We might go in and help with internal auditing, ISO standards, AS9100. You might have heard of those terms used in this field. We also do a lot of leadership development, strategic planning, cultural awareness, supervisory skills. And a big one for us is also IT implementation. How do you put a software system in? How do you put a cobot, a robot, use 3D printing in your processes? One thing I also like to add is we do food processing. A lot of people think that's interesting, but it is a type of manufacturing, and it's the best because the quality control is tasting it at the end. So I love that. So I'm here. I want to talk a little about something that we did new this year. We just launched our inaugural Manufacturing Insight Survey. We wanted to better understand how things were going for the clients that we work with. And we wanted to do it for several reasons. Number one, we want to make sure that as an entity, we're addressing the needs for our clients, that we're understanding, are we providing the resources and the information and the services they need, or should we add to that? And are there other things that are plaguing the folks that we work with? We focused on business, operational efficiency, technology, and workforce development and supply chain. And so I think it'd be interesting to see how the sentiment and the feelings of our manufacturers resonate, with what Paul had to say. So, Paul will appreciate this. I did confer with some of our economics experts across the state. The University of Michigan Economic Department, they do have a forecast that they run every year. Maybe some of you have gone to the Oakland County one. They do some for some of the groups around the state. But they did a U.S. and a Michigan outlook, and we wanted to compare that to the results of the survey. Some of the things that you heard Paul say also resonate here. So we see PMI, which you mentioned below, that's about below 50. So we see that inventory is still weak. We're seeing it grow a little and stabilize a bit this year. And employment levels are starting to level off a bit. One of the things that we experience, who's in automotive? Raise your hand if you're in automotive. Anybody in here? Got a couple. How many of you have clients that are in automotive? Anybody? Have a lot of adjacent entities. So when the new administration came in over a year ago, there was an abrupt change to policy as it pertained especially to the electric vehicles and ICE vehicles. So in the very beginning of the administration, that really caused a lot of issues for clients if they had gone either all in or part in. When you're a small or medium-sized manufacturer, you don't have the luxury of saying, I'm going to do both ICE and EV, right? You kind of have to do one or the other because of the issues with capital. So we did have a couple clients where they had gone all in an EV, and then with the abrupt changes, it really hurt them this last year. We're also seeing some policy changes. So CAFE standards were rolled back recently. So that means that the environmental standards that we saw placed on some of the OEMs have been rolled back. And that is now starting to flatten out a bit. We're seeing, again, that play out with the EV and the ICE. We're seeing that focus again on the ICE vehicles, and it's starting to stabilize a bit. Tariffs, while it was very crazy last year, it is starting to, again, slow down a bit in terms of the frequency of the changes and the uncertainty. And then the other area that we're seeing is the big three are seeing some net gains, and that's starting to trickle down slowly to the suppliers that are in their ecosystems. While 24 and 25 were tough with employment, we are getting information, at least the economists from the U of M, they're saying 26 and 27, they're more hopeful for some stabilization in the employment arena. So what we did was we ran this survey, and we did it for a month, and we opened it up to manufacturers across the state. We had leaders, and they're mostly C-suite, plant managers, and owners of these facilities, and we asked them to give us your feedback. How are you feeling? What are you seeing? And most of the folks that answered the questions were small, under 25 million, and we were lucky to get about almost half of the counties across the state. The high-level summary that we see here is that 71% are saying that they think that the sales and the economy for them are stagnant or declining. And then they are feeling that they're still investing in their workforce. We still have quite a few. But the good news is over half of them are still investing in new products. 65 said that they are worried that it's going to be either stagnant or get worse when it comes to 26. So what are the strengths and the opportunities that people see? One of the things that we're seeing, and we were pleasantly surprised to see, is that 60% are investing in information technology, whether it is a robot, a cobot, software, some sort of what we refer to in the industry as Industry 4.0, using that kind of equipment in their plants. AI, that was the buzzword of last year. AI was one of the big words. And 60% now also realize that if you're going to use AI, that you also have to have strong cybersecurity. But I do like to mention that's still a lot of room for improvement for a lot of folks. Manufacturers are also realizing, like you just mentioned, jobs are tough. It's hard to get people, but we need to keep people content, happy, take care of them to the best of our ability. So people are investing more, and they're looking at how do I improve culture and how do I retain and train the employees that I have. When it comes to threats and concerns, economic and political uncertainty is still at the forefront. People are still nervous. What are tariffs going to do this year? We found that, what I like to say, so if you back up, there's kind of words, themes that you see bubble up. In 2020, everyone used the word unprecedented, right? That was the word of COVID. In 25, the word was uncertainty. I heard uncertainty constantly used last year. And so I like to say that, at least personally, for 26, I am trying to manifest stability. That's my word for the year, so please work with me to make that true. But as an entity that gets federal funding, I like to say that it was like a rodeo last year. I joked with the staff every day I'd get on the rodeo horse and not sure what kind of bucking bronco I'd have that day. And our leaders felt that too. When we surveyed them as a leader, and I'm sure you can all appreciate this, it's very hard to do long-term strategic planning when you don't know the policy changes that are coming that day. I mean, it's not even months. So it was a real challenge to plan as a business owner. The other thing that we're seeing is that even despite going through COVID, even understanding that supply chains and having resiliency in that area is very important, not as many of our clients have duplicated their supply chains and become more resilient despite that. But they do realize it's a priority, and they realize it's something that they need to improve. One of the things that came out was that business leaders, while they recognize these things, some of our folks are just so busy working in the business, they're having a hard time working on the business, and that's where some of these strategic priorities come out. We are still a little bit in the legacy stage, and one of the issues across the state of Michigan, when I say legacy, is we have businesses that are getting into multi-generation ownership, and they're calling it the silver tsunami with the business owners, the legacy owners. And those are folks who are trying to either get children or other people to take over, and it's really difficult. As we see, it's tough to get folks to get into manufacturing jobs as it is, let alone take over a manufacturing company. So in 25, these are the results. Like I said, we're seeing some new product development, but we could do more. And we're seeing an increase in our automation use and, again, in the adoption of I4O. The one thing that was really interesting when it comes to 26 priorities for people, in this last several years, the number one issue for our companies was finding talent. Raise your hand if finding talent for your organizations was hard. Do you find that was a struggle? Raise your hands if that was your number one priority or issue. A few folks, okay? So for manufacturers, that was constantly coming up as how do I fill jobs? Across the U.S., we've seen in the last few years about 500,000 job openings, and it's been really tough to fill these critical roles. But this year, that's dropped down to number 2. Our folks said that now the number 1 priority is increasing sales and diversification. So one of the things that we work with our clients on is how do you get in, if you're automotive, how can you get into defense? How can you get into aerospace? What we have seen is automotive has been a bit stagnant and maybe even declining in some areas. But our clients that are working in aerospace and defense right now, they can't keep up. They are so busy. I have one particular client, she's over in Macomb County. She does work for SpaceX, and the demand, it's so hard, they're running 24/7. So it's very fascinating to see when you also think about geopolitical events and the pressures and the demands there. People want to increase their productivity, but how do you increase productivity if you don't have enough people? So they're trying to work with that. And then, again, the one issue is capital, right? Who here just goes to work every day and says, you know what, I have so much money, I'm good. I'm good, we're good. Business is good. Anybody? No, not having this. So we when we work with our folks, we give them the advice of how can we help people, identify, look at the real problem. We work with folks on root cause analysis in your business. We use recommendations and strategies such as start small, start with one thing in your plant. Don't try to do everything all at once. And then we also say, look at how can you try to use partners? There's a lot of organizations out there in the state that have grant funding opportunities. SBA has also redone some and added some stuff to their portfolio in terms of access to capital. So not only do we help them with our technical know-how, but we also try to point folks in the right direction on where to get it if we don't have it. The other thing here that when it comes to workforce, 85% of you still, and our manufacturers still said that they did invest in hire people, so that's good news. The challenges that our folks are saying is that they're having a hard time finding workforce with the right skills, though. So folks are either having to train internally, create programs, or go to outside entities to get help. The other thing is finding on-the-job training programs or apprenticeships, too. Sometimes it's just really difficult to figure out what it is you need. And is it, some people grapple with, do I need the apprenticeship? Do I really need the certificate? Or can I do some kind of acute near-term training just to get them through? So in 26, our manufacturers are really focused on the workforce and getting a skilled pipeline, and they're also looking for affordable solutions to upskill their staff. We work with the folks, when we talk to our manufacturers, we say you've got to get creative. One of the really interesting things that we saw is leveraging mentorship and technology. So it really, I thought, was a very clever example. We have a company up in Coatmish, Michigan, near Traverse City, if you're familiar with that, up north. And it's hard to find talent in northern Michigan, right? We have a lot of younger folks who are either going downstate or out of state. So what this owner did is he started hiring retirees at 10 hours a week and 20 hours a week. You have a lot of folks who are up there. It's a beautiful place to retire. But there's a handful that have said, you know what? I'm good with the honey-do list. I think I've had enough, and I could use a little work just to keep entertained, keep busy, and keep my mind working. So by doing so, he's piecemealed folks in 10, 20, 40-hour shifts. He's been able to fill it. But what you get is you get experienced people who are well-trained, and they also make great mentors in the company to the younger people. So I think it's a really fascinating example of thinking outside the box. We also work with folks when it says deep dive into other talent pools, non-traditional things. So Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, I come from a background of working in the state and also as a veteran. There are a lot of folks that have been in the military, and manufacturing would be a very good transition in terms of skill sets, leadership, similar type of environments. So we advise folks to reach out to that agency. They have a program where you can learn how to recruit, to hire, and then train and retain veterans in your facility. And then we also say get creative, work together with other companies. If you have training needs, there are opportunities for funding those through employer-led collaboratives. And then the last area I want to hit on here too is supply chain. So again, I mentioned supply chain. People are one deep in some of those areas. So people recognize that. They want to expand their networks, get 2 or 3 suppliers, and really strengthen and solidify that area. So we have advised folks, how do you do that? You've got to get on some of these websites. There are certain supply chain matchmaking websites that are out there. You have to improve your website so that people can find you with search engine optimization. And you also have to think outside your walls. You have to promote and start working with folks. So, this is just a slide here that talks about technology assessments, consulting, training, some of the things that we do. But one of the very important things that I like to highlight is that, a lot of times companies just don't know where to start, right? You don't know what you don't know. So we really work closely with our folks. We bucket them. Are you a startup? Because there's very different needs for a startup than there are maybe from a legacy manufacturer standpoint. So we have these different things. What I would say is the biggest thing that we advise right now, and when I mentioned working on the business instead of working in the business, is how do you solve for some of these openings in your workforce? So it's the combination of using IT. Put a cobot, which is a robot which it works directly next to a person. Put those kinds of technology into places where those are dirty, they're dangerous, and they're dull jobs. It's a place where you're having a hard time trying to find someone. So you have to implement technology and then upskill the folks that you have. So that's where we're really focused on work, because we're not going to produce 500,000 babies. You were talking about cows? Well, we can't produce babies and people that fast either. So what we're saying is, how to use technology to solve for some of the shortages that we have. Let's work smarter and not harder. The other thing that we're really diving and leaning into is AI. So again, I mentioned AI was a buzzword. Well, we now have said, okay, enough of talking about it, let's do something. So we're working really closely with our manufacturers on the AI piece. And what I tell our folks is, you have to go into a business. You can't just slap AI onto a process without first looking at how your business runs. Because if you put AI on top of a bad process, you're just doing a bad process faster. Okay, that's all it's doing. You're just spitting it out in 15 minutes versus a 1 week. So we look at creating a strong foundation. Once you've got that, putting technology in to then solve for some shortages. That's collecting the data. And then that next layer is the AI application, and now you're interpreting and using the data. So that means you creating chat bots, and you can do this in your businesses too. I'd also think about this, front of the house, HR. Maybe you don't have an HR, or you have a fractional. So you can use it by uploading your worker books, your HR book, and so people can get access to information without having to wait for a boss. It's always in meetings. We also advise people on supply chain. There's deep search. There's a way that you can do, it's called deep research, and there's a way you can go in, put the parameters you're looking for. Maybe you're a manufacturer and you're looking for mild steel. So you put in what you're looking for, what are the parameters, what's the geographic region, and it's able to go out there and scour possible matches for your business. And then we even get as far as to the back of the house. There are machines such as CNC machines, and there's code, and there is technology that runs those. So we can use and we can teach our clients how to use something called vibe coding. So how do you look at a process, and maybe you're making something, I saw a laugh because he knows what vibe coding is, but maybe you're making a piece that takes you 12 minutes, but we, through a few iterations of this coding, we were able to now make a part in 6 minutes. So now you're increasing your throughput, you're more efficient. A good example of this and why it's impactful, we helped a company up in northern Michigan with increasing, or I should say decreasing, the amount of time it took to do some injection molding. It was machine monitoring, and we improved the process by 3 seconds. And most people say, okay, great, 3 seconds. Well, 3 seconds over a year led to an additional $500,000 in revenue for a 60-person company. So that additional $500,000 in revenue was getting new people, investing in equipment. So that 6-minute reduction from 12 to 6 minutes in that part, that's huge. So how do we help folks? Paul, you're talking about the economic pressures, materials cost more, people cost more, health benefits are going up. So we have to think smarter, and we have to think better about how we run our businesses so that we can optimize the money that we do have. So I hope that gave you a nice little glimpse into manufacturing. I know that you're not in it all every day, but you know, it does affect us. Manufacturing is really a major component of Michigan, of the Midwest. We are an automotive state. We do have other types, but it's important to understand the climate because it does affect you, either directly or indirectly. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Wow, that was a lot of information in about 45 minutes. So thank you so much to our speakers, Paul and Ingrid. Thanks to our moderator, Gavin. Just a couple program notes before we send you out into this balmy mid-30 degree Michigan summer. I usually ask at the beginning and I forgot to. So by a show of hands, who's attending their first chamber event this morning? Quite a few. Well, thank you and welcome. Hopefully you enjoyed what you received this morning. If you did, you may want to think about circling March 11th on your calendar. That's our next forecast breakfast. It's our government forecast. We are featuring a conversation with Mike Duggan, former mayor of the city of Detroit, former head of the DMC, current independent candidate for governor. So the format's going to be a little different. It's just going to be myself and Mr. Duggan having a conversation about his vision for Michigan. This morning's event was completely sold out. It sold out a week ago. We are expecting a even larger group for Mr. Duggan. That breakfast is actually going to be held at the Kingsley Hotel, just right on Woodward and Long Lake. So if you do plan on coming, and especially if you plan on getting a table for your friends and colleagues, please call the office early and register because we are expecting, again, to have a complete sellout. So that's March 11th. Again, I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thanks for everything that you do in support of the Chamber, and hopefully we'll see you on March 11th for the government forecast.